things, but it's just the default. And the last one, really powerful, but we need to understand iOS multitasking to do it, is background session configuration. A background session configuration means start downloading this file, and even if the user switches to another app or my app dies, keep downloading it. And when it's done, call me back and launch my app if necessary to handle that. Okay? So it's a very powerful session. But today, we're just going to do the simpler ephemeral. Okay? And so now we'll just create the session, URL session. Oops, session. And I'm going to create this NRS URL session using the default way to do it, which is just by specifying the configuration only. I'm not doing the delegate or delegate queue. So my callback is going to be on a different queue, not on the main queue. All right? And so now let's create that URL session download task. Okay? So this task is going to be the task that's going to do the downloading for us. And we just ask the session, please create us a download task with that request with this completion handler. Okay? And let's go ahead and put this on the other line so you can see it. One little trick, if you have an argument that's a block like this, okay, if you double click it, it will put it in there for you. Okay? In other words, it'll type all this stuff in. I don't like this name, location. Just to make it clear, this is local file. This is an URL of the local file that is downloading this content to this URL too. That's why I like to call it that local file. And then here's the code that we want to do in here. And what happens when it's done? Okay, when we get this completion handler called? Well, we want to set self.image. Okay, but the only thing here we have to be careful of is we're not on the main queue, so we have to do that in the other queue. So let's do this. If there's no error, first of all, you can see that there's this error argument right here. So I'm going to say if there's no error. If there was an error, you might want to put not found or something in your view somewhere. But if there's no error, then I'm going to do an interesting thing here that you might be like, what? Which is I'm going to check to see if the request URL's URL is equal to self.image URL. Okay, why would I do that? Whoops, request.url. Why would I do this? Why would I check to see if this is, which we set to be this, why would I check to see if this is equal to self.image URL? Anyone have an idea? But, yeah.
In case we changed it after we sent the request?
Absolutely. Okay. In case somebody else in the app, changed the image URL, asked us to display something different while this was outstanding. Okay. This URL is out fetching. Let's take it. It takes 10 minutes. Okay. Really slow website out there. It takes 10 minutes. And in that 10 minutes, the user clicks on something else and wants this view to display something else. Well, this download task is still going to complete 10 minutes later, but we want to ignore it, basically, because it's a request for something we're not going to use anymore. So this is something that's important to understand about multitasking, is that things take time. And when things are finished, you have to make sure the state of the world still matches what you thought it was when you asked it to start. Okay? Multitasking programming, multi-threaded programming rather, can be kind of mind-bending in that way. But you really have to have the discipline to think, okay, what if this takes 10 minutes? Then what do I want things to do? All right, so that's the kind of thing you have to do. So in this case, though, it is the same. So let's go ahead and create a UI image out of the URL data that came back. So I'm going to create a local UI image here. And I'm going to do that doing UI image, image with data. And this time I can just say the local file. Oops, sorry. I'm going to do NSU data. Data with contents of file. But now the URL is this local file. Okay? So this right here is doing locally, so it's not going to block like this one did. This one blocked because this could be a network HTTP URL. This one is a local file, so it can't block. Okay? Now, notice that I'm doing this. It looks like a UIKit call. Am I doing this on the main queue? No, I see nodding heads or shaking heads. You're right. No, this is not happening on the main queue. And it turns out that that's okay. UI image is one of the few UIKit classes that you're allowed to do things to off the main queue. And that's because this is not actually going to do anything on screen. I'm just creating a local variable here that is parsing this URL and looking at its data and creating an image for me. Okay? Here, let's make this a little more readable by moving this back. Okay? So this is not going to actually touch the UI. I'm just creating this UI image object at this point. That's okay. But the next line of code I want to do is self.image equals image. Okay? Now I want to set my image to that. This line of code has to happen on the main thread. Because look at all the UI stuff we're going to do when we do set image. We're going to be talking to the scroll view. We're going to be doing image size fit. We're going to change the content size. This could be doing all kinds of stuff. So this has to be on the main thread. And so I'm going to do that with dispatch async, dispatch underbar queue, get main queue, and a block here. And inside this block, I'm going to put this call right here. Cut, paste. Sorry. Okay. Now another way I could have done this was self perform selector on main thread, assign selector, set image with object the image, wait until done, no. Okay, these two lines of code are pretty much exactly the same thing. Okay? Everyone understand that? We'll leave it this way. Okay, everyone understand this line of code? Question?
So wouldn't you want to check to see if the image has already been downloaded before you start downloading it? If the image is saved? 10 minutes after you download the file, the user clicks again, that image is already
Yeah.
saved.
So the question is, before I start downloading this image, wouldn't I want to check to see if I already have a download going on, this trying to image it? And the answer is yes, you would. You know, this is a demo, we're not doing it, but you would want to do that. You probably want to have a local variable, which is the URL that you're currently downloading, maybe even an array of them, because the person might click back and forth and back and forth. And so these are all the ones I have outstanding. And then you'd want to go look and see if it contains that object. And if it does, just don't do this. Okay, and wait for it to come back. So that's a really good point. And then I have this warning right here. Oh, sorry, question.
So you said that we're no longer in the main thread when you do a completion handler. What line exactly makes it in that code that starts the new queue? Because we never actually physically.
Yeah. So the question. So you mean where is this queue that all this stuff?
Yeah, and when did we start actually?
Okay. So that queue that is going to do this completion handler, right? This completion handler right here. The queue to create that is created by the session task, and it creates it when it needs it. Probably it creates it right before it calls this completion handler. But if you had a delegate, it might create it right at the beginning and use it to call your delegate, right? So in this case, it probably created it right before you need it and fired this off. Because the actual URL download is happening in yet another queue, right? The URL downloading queue. And in fact, it could be in another process if you use that background session thing. So that's all happening. But this queue is probably created right before it calls this handler. It's created by the session, URL session, right before it calls this handler.
It does not pause the main queue though, right?
No, because this is a totally separate queue, totally unrelated to it. Okay, this is the only time we're touching the main queue. Right here is when we spend. And even here, this block gets put in line on the main queue. The main queue might be busy doing other things, okay? Pulling other blocks off its queue, because this goes at the end of the line. So if there's other blocks, those are going to get executed first, and then eventually this block will get executed. Okay? So anyway, we have this one warning right here. Why do we have this warning? That's because this task, we created it, but we never sent it a message. You see, this says unused variable task. And that's a good reminder for us to say task resume. Because if you don't say task resume, this task starts out suspended and it will never actually do anything. It just sit there waiting for someone to resume it. Yeah?
Is there any way to keep track of the task and abort it if, say, the user clicks on a different image?
Yeah, so the question is there ways to abort tasks? I'm going to talk more generically about blocks on threads or on queues. If a block is taken off a queue, it starts to run, it cannot be stopped. It has to stop itself. It would have to realize, oh, it no longer makes sense for me to be doing what I'm doing. Okay? There is some API in the URL session to do things like that, but I want you to understand that for blocks on queues, once they start, they cannot be stopped. They can only stop themselves. They can just exit from themselves when they realize they're no longer necessary. Okay, I don't have time to get into the URL session stuff, but that's the answer to your question. Okay, so let's see how this works. Hopefully I haven't forgotten anything here. Okay, so now if I click flower, you can already see it's different. Okay, when I click peppers, it immediately goes here, even though it's blank. Okay, and the photo comes in later. Okay, but it's immediate. And in fact, I could go back. Flower, nah, I don't want flower, I want peppers. Nah, I want jellyfish. Okay, and so the UI is staying completely responsive, even though I'm downloading these things multiple times actually in the background unnecessarily. But so this is the way you want your UI to be, very responsive, okay, and just things happening, you know, the instant the user wants them, okay. Now, there's one thing that's kind of bad about this UI, though. It's when I click here, there's no feedback that's doing anything here. This just looks like, oh, well, I clicked on flower. Oh, there must not be a flower, right? Stanford network's so fast that this happens. But it's like, oh, there's no flower. Oh, well, skip it. There's no peppers. Because there's no feedback that it's doing anything. So let's put some feedback in here that shows something moving or something, you know, a little spinning wheel that shows the user, hey, I'm doing something for you in the background, not to worry. And there is a UI view that's built into iOS that's really easy to use for doing exactly that. So let's go back to our storyboard here. So we have our storyboard. And what I'm going to do is into this view right here, I'm going to drag a UI activity indicator, which is towards the top here. Even looks like a spinning wheel. So this is the little spinning wheel that you've seen. So I'm going to drag it in here. Now, this is going to be a good opportunity to talk about document outline. So when I drag this in, okay, that's great. It seems like I've done a good thing. I've dragged this in here. But actually, I didn't do a very good thing here because dragging that in actually made that a subview of the scroll view. Okay? When you drag a view in, on top of another view, it makes it a subview of that. And we can see that over here in the document outline. Here's the scroll view. And see how this is indented a little? That means it's a subview. Now, I don't want it to be a subview. I want this wheel to sit in front of the scroll view, right, and be spinning whenever the scroll view is doing something and to hide itself when it stops. And so I can make this not be a subview by picking it up and moving it to be a sibling. Okay? Now, the problem here is I put it in the back. Things at the top of the subview list are in the back. So I can just put this up here. And now I've got this in front and this in back. Okay, and they're siblings. So this is in front, okay? Another thing I want to do here is set my constraints on this guy. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to set it to be horizontal, vertical, centered. And we can just make sure that it did the right thing, which it did. Okay, I got a little yellow there. So let's fix that. Fix misplacement, put it right in the middle. Okay, so we got that. The other thing I want to do is I want this little spinning thing. I want it to be large, so the style I'm going to use is large white, but I don't want it to be white because it's on a white background, so I'm barely going to be able to see the thing. So let's change the color. So let's make the color be, let's make it be like the blue of the buttons. Okay, that's a pretty good color for it to be. Also, notice these behaviors. Okay, animating means this thing starts out animating, which I want, because when this view first appears, I want it to be animating because I'm loading from the start. And then here's hides when stopped. That says when you stop it in your code, it's going to hide it. So it's not going to stop turning and then sit there blocking your scroll view. It's going to hide itself. Okay, so that's a really cool feature. You almost always want hides when stopped on there. Okay, you may or may not want it to start out animating, but you always want hides when stopped. Okay, so now let's go back to our code over here. And when do we want to start and stop this thing? Okay, when's a good time to start and stop? Well, a good time to start it is when we're starting to download an image. So I'm going to say, oh, well, first of all, why don't we make an outlet to it? So let's go back to our storyboard. Let's get our assistant editor up here.